All right. Well, welcome back to SoulBack. This is the R&B podcast. Kyle here, back with Tom, Ed, and sponsored by Reviews and Done. Apparently, what's going on here, Tom?
That's our boy. That's our boy Derek Dunn, our guest for this episode. He'll be on here to join us later on.
Yeah, players. If you know SoulBack, Soul and Stereo, you know I got Soul, the Cipher. You know Derek Dunn, Reviews and Done. He does his thing with music and movies. So shout out to my boy. Glad that he's coming through, and we'll have him jump in to talk about some of his favorites in a minute.
Can I shout out a few people who are on Instagram Live with us?
Yep.
Our boy Music Scribe is in the house.
Woo,
Our boy
woo.
Damon Dunn is in the house. Laurence.
What time is it over there?
I see Jonathan B. I see Tar Heels fan. We got a few people in the house.
My son Damon, he just celebrated a birthday. Happy birthday to my boy.
What did he finally turn into a teenager?
16. Look at that.
Wow.
Guys, before we discuss 1992, it's a good time for R&B, guys. We just had a great event. We had Keyshia Cole and Ashanti,
Ed,
going on Verzuz.
Ed,
Oh, boy.
Hold
Ed.
on. Before you get Ed's opinion, can I just give you my opinion? Can I tell you my favorite part of that whole show?
Good luck.
yes.
Ready? Okay. My favorite part. Just kidding. I didn't watch the thing. I have no idea.
Well,
Somebody knocked that glass out of his tan.
for
Let me
the
take a sip.
record, only one out of us three watched that thing, and it was me.
True.
And let me say, and I want the people to respond. I don't have Instagram open, so Tom, you're gonna have to read the comments out. I just want to know from your guys' perspective, who won that versus battle? Because to me, it was a landslide, just like I expected. Ashanti dominated that battle, but I want to see the
Well,
responses.
I'm reading the responses. They're great, by the way.
Yes, I trust Derry, and he said it was boring. So if he said it was boring, it was boring. I
Well-
can only see the track list, and the track list, the second half, I don't know what Keyshia was picking. She's picking the randomest songs ever. So Ashanti did whip her butt on that second half. That first half looked like a wash for Keyshia, though. Judging
I'll
by
just say, let me clarify. I didn't watch, but I've never watched any versus battles, so that's just me. I don't watch TV. I don't watch movies, anything. So that's just normal. That
This is
wasn't a
very
diss.
true.
We definitely love Ashanti and Keyshia Cole. That's not, even though Keyshia Cole has us blocked for no apparent reason.
Oh,
We still love them both.
You know why? Kyle just proved why.
I love
And
Keyshia Cole.
Finally, wouldn't we already know who the winner was before the thing even aired? Ashanti has a way stronger catalog. Why do we need to watch the thing to know who was the
Ashanti
winner?
has a way stronger catalog. This is gonna be a long night. Whew.
What
How
do you
many times
even
can
mean?
you hear a grown woman say "baby"? How many times?
Oh, my-
How did you make it?
If you look at the hit for hit, who has more hits? I mean, it's not even close.
That
Oh.
that was my point.
Yes,
Ed-
we're looking at hit per hit.
Can I just say?
in 2002?
Can I just say one thing before we actually move on to our 1992? Well, actually, we have a chicken discussion, but before those are always fun. But before we get into the chicken discussion, Ed, the biggest problem with Keyshia Cole on that battle, aside from the fact that she was like 2 hours late, was the fact that her sequencing was terrible at the end.
I agree.
You knew Ashanti had Foolish and Always on Time in that pocket, ready to come out. And what does Keyshia Cole come out with? The Remy Ma song, and not even the one on Remy Ma's album, because the one on Remy Ma's album is like a 5-star song. But she puts out the one with French Montana and Remy Ma. And then
He was like, I'm like,
and then the
"Hey,
other
you
song-
picking your favorite songs? Because what are these songs?
the other song was a new song that no one's ever heard before.
Well, I want to hear, because apparently she and Ashanti had new songs. I want to check those out. So I will go back and do that at some point. I forgot about that until you just mentioned it. But no,
Yes.
I agree. When it comes to that track list, Keyshia was struggling. But if we are talking about overall career,
Well,
I will gladly put on my Keyshia records before I put my Ashanti.
I have one more point to make on that about the versus battle, because people like you say the overall battle matters from the first song all the way to the last song. Let me pass it over to Tom. For most people that watch sports, do they not only watch the last 5 minutes of the game?
He's actually right. You got to save the best for last. You can't
Yeah.
just play the biggest hits first.
Oh,
that doesn't make any sense.
I agree. And I
exactly.
agree poorly. But I'm a guy that goes from front to back, the rooter to the tutor, to the beginning to the end. And I saw a whole bunch of whackness at the beginning.
Anyways, all right. So we're here to talk about 1992 today. I'll tell you what, Tom. We'll talk about the chicken later. We'll call it the chicken intermission. But
oh man, the chicken intermission. All right,
exciting times. But 1992, guys. I put out the collages. New Jack Swing is still full in effect, but people like Mary J. Blige are starting to blossom. TLC starting to come in. Ed, paint the picture for us. 1992. How old were you? What were you doing? And were you allowed to listen to R&B at that age?
Yes, I was allowed to listen to R&B at that age. I mean, it wasn't like we were getting the suggestive songs. Well, SWE was talking about Downtown. We'll get to that later on. But I guess I was like 11 or 12 at that point. So young Ed going on here, but I still had my finger a little bit on the pulse. This is a very interesting year, and I know this is the year we're probably going to wrap up a lot of our yearly discussions. And the reason why this is kind of a good year to cap it off is because this is the year to me where we really see the last throes of New Jack Swing and going into hip hop soul. And as most of you know on this chat and watching us live or listening to us on your podcast streaming choice, service of choice, this is the era that kind of laid the foundations for the hip hop soul era that a lot of y'all love when it comes to the late 90s R&B and the and the early 2000s R&B, even in the Keyshia and the Ashantis that we mentioned earlier. A lot of that foundation was laid in this era right here. We'll talk about some big albums that really set the ground. And at the time, we didn't know. At the time, we're just like, oh, here's this new sound. It's coming in. We like it. But little did we know that it would really start to change the landscape going forward for the next, really, 20, 30 years.
Well, I was 8 going on 9 that year. So a lot of these albums I had to catch later on, revisit.
Yep.
Let me ask you this, Ed. Was R&B pop at the time? Were they playing R&B hits on pop radio?
A little bit. Definitely more than now, but not as strong as it would be a couple years later. When we get to Boyz II Men, Mariah, TLC, they'll be dominating a couple years down the road. But it wasn't obscure to hear, as random as it sounds, Men at Large of all people popping up on pop radio, because the crossover, it just wasn't as hard and fast as it is now. So there was a little bit, it would get much bigger, but this is where we saw the foundation laid.
Gotcha. Men of Vision, pop radio.
I mean, I did the collage earlier, and there's a lot of great albums that we can really talk about. I'm purposely, guys, going to not talk about the Bobby Brown album because Derek Dunn, who's our guest and New Edition's #1 fan, will probably spend 20 minutes on it. But Ed,
I just mentioned something about Bobby Brown, though, actually, in this era. I want to ask Ed, actually, because people, I mean, I was too young to realize, obviously, but people would always say Bobby Brown was Usher before there was an Usher. Was that the case in 92 still? I know Bobby, this was kind of the end of his run a bit as a solo artist, but was he considered Usher at the time?
If you're going to compare, it's hard to compare directly, but if you're going to make a comparison, I can kind of buy that. Because he was the total package as far as a performer. Incredible songs, incredible stage presence, incredible choreography. He could do it all, and that's really what Usher would kind of bring into the next stage of his career, not 94, but when we get later on into the 90s and into 2000s. So in that sense, of all the artists of this era, yes, he's the most Usher of that. And then later on, we'll have Cousin Chris. But yeah, I can get that. And even though this album, I don't want to give away too much about this album. This is kind of like the last of the big Bobby era. Not a bad comparison.
Do you guys think, because My Prerogative is on this album, right?
Yeah.
Is that this one or the last one?
I think it's on this one.
I thought it was this one.
Yeah.
All right.
Has that song lasted? Because that was a big song. I know that song.
I have no idea. That thing was everywhere. I hated that song because they played it so much. But yeah, absolutely, that song has lasted, and it's become one of his signature hits because of that legacy. when a lot of artists talk about now, I'm sorry, Derek, I'm stepping on you, I'm stealing your thunder, dog. But so many people, talk Bobby the king of R&B. The reason why, even though I still think that's a stretch, the reason why is because that foundation was laid here this year and a couple years prior. When it comes to mainstream face of R&B, it was Bobby. He was doing it. That would change pretty quickly, starting with some of the people who will be debuting this year. But yep, I think at the time he was kind of the face.
We were incorrect, actually. My Prerogative was on the previous album in '89.
I thought so. I need to stick with my guns. I was like,
I was 8 years
Wait,
old.
what's
what
on
do you
this?
need to ask me about?
What's on this album then?
Humping Around.
Yes, Humping Around.
Okay,
Sullivan
yes,
mentioned.
that's correct. Yes. All right. Well, never
And
mind.
I saw a comment here from Jonathan B. Chris Brown is like Bobby. Usher is like MJ.
No, I think it's like flipped, because Usher idolized Bobby Brown.
I feel more Usher and Bobby and more MJ, and because MJ and Chris definitely. But you can still take elements of both, because there are elements that were sprinkled into it. So it's not direct, but it is what it is. I just see more MJ and Cousin Chris.
Anyway,
I could never hear MJ singing "These Hoes Ain't Loyal." Could you guys?
Absolutely not. But I will say, though, I have always said, if anybody could make trap work, I guarantee you Michael could. He could adapt to anything.
Because he would have done it with grace. It would have been classy.
He would have done it, but he would have made it his own. It would have sounded like, think about the Dangerous album. He made New Jack Swing sound like Michael. Michael wasn't sounding like, oh, he just sounds like Guy. Like, no one said that, because he made it his own.
Yep. Sorry, Ed. I'm looking at the notes you provided us with. It says Bobby Brown's Bobby album dropped with singles like My Prerogative.
Oh, Ed.
That was your fault,
really?
Right? Yeah, I'm looking at it.
Well, I must have been sipping on what Tom was sipping on then, if I said that. But yeah, that
Cheers,
was not
bros.
that album.
I was watching the Drink Champs podcast recently. I feel inspired, guys. I'm about to be on one.
Oh boy.
This will be one.
Can we talk about a couple of soundtracks here? The Boomerang soundtrack and the Bodyguard soundtrack. Ed, aren't these like two of, if not the most legendary soundtracks that we have when it comes to 90s R&B?
We have talked a little bit before about how strong soundtracks were, and they would definitely be more, they would have an even bigger legacy going forward into the 90s. But those two here specifically, remember we talked about albums that it seemed like everybody had? Everybody's mama had the Bodyguard soundtrack. My mom didn't have very many cassettes, not CDs, but cassettes around 90, because this kind of time she was probably getting out of music. But she had that Bodyguard soundtrack for sure. So that one was huge. Another platform for Whitney to just continue this incredible legacy that she had with her career. And Boomerang, to me, one of the greatest soundtracks of all time. We talked a couple of weeks ago about the legacy of Waiting to Exhale. Boomerang is right up there with it. It's 1A, 1B as far as like great soundtracks.
Let me ask you guys a question. Was in this time Whitney considered an R&B artist? Because I feel like that's almost an unfair categorization.
Well, it's funny, but it's funny you say that, because early on, like early 80s Whitney, there was some hesitance. People were seeing her as a pop artist. To me, she started drifting over into kind of hip hop when she started with the what's the song called? With My Baby Tonight. That album was the one that kind of made her a little bit more R&B. So by now, I think she was accepted in it. I don't remember anyone. Again, I'm younger. I wasn't as in tune to the community as I am now, of course. But I don't remember any pushback like there was early on in her career.
Gotcha.
Some big joints on here. I Will Always Love You. I Have Nothing. I really like I Have Nothing. I'm not a big fan of I Will Always Love You. That song is like too sad.
I like
Every
it,
Woman was on here.
All of those songs, man, I love them, but also they were just played so much. I'm like, oh my gosh. I recognize and appreciate the artistry, but y'all, if I never heard it again, I'd be cool.
Here we go. Jonathan B. She was pop, but transitioned to R&B because Black people didn't like her as a pop artist in the 80s. That's interesting. That's interesting to think about.
I do definitely remember that conversation.
Now, Tom, let's talk about En Vogue. You had a chance to speak to Dawn from En Vogue. She reflected on this time. Such a big moment for R&B, such a big moment from En Vogue. Like, what did you take away from your conversation with Dawn about this album?
this is the last one she was on. Is that right, guys?
No,
she was in the later album.
Sort of.
I thought she was only on the first two.
No, because she was definitely on the Set It Off soundtrack song.
Gotcha. Someone could fact check me in the
y'all
Instagram.
Yeah, I thought she was still here early on. It was like the recording of that last album,
exactly,
I think, is when she started to dip out.
Yeah, so some of her vocals are still on that album, but she's not on the album cover.
Right. That's when she was pulling out, but she still had input in the album.
Yeah.
So this album was really important to her. I mean, she started doing the group with her and the other member that broke away is Maxine.
Mm-hmm.
As they called themselves Funky Divas, because this album kind of categorized them as with that title. Man, people sometimes forget, En Vogue was kind of the girl groups in the 90s. They were kind of the first one out of the gate. I think they came out, it might have been like the late in 89. I can't remember exactly the date, but I told Dawn, I feel like they set the foundation a bit for some of the other groups to come in after. We're going to talk about SWV in a bit on the show, and I know that they were even influenced by En Vogue. So,
yeah,
I mean, to me, this is a monumental album. I think I'm going to call this one their best, Ed. I don't know where you put it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's their best, and it's their signature album. As folks have said in the comments, now they've jogged my memory. They're right. She was on Don't Let Go. And then as they were working on that album, that's when she peaced out. So by the time that one came out, 97 or so, she was gone. But anyway, yeah, I think this one is one that if you're a fan of that at the time, you really respect and remember how huge En Vogue was.
Yeah.
If you were a fan later on in the 90s, that impact was kind of gone because Dawn had gone and there was like a new generation taking over. But in the early 90s, they were the girl group. Like we'll talk about some others who debuted this year who would have a strong decade. But at this point in time, they were really the standard that was set. And when we look back, sometimes we don't give them enough credit that they deserve for having that very strong portion of the year and had hits sprinkled throughout. But they got to be at the top of the list for 90s groups. Not the very top, but got to be top 5 for sure.
Well, they have I would say the second most legendary Coca-Cola commercial. Tyrese is his first, but En Vogue had a Coca-Cola commercial. That lets you know how big they were.
I remember, yes.
So that's pretty cool stuff. That just lets you know, because like when we look back at it now, people might not realize just how big some of these groups were. And that's why we tend to label them as washed up or have fallen off. But there was a period of time. These artists, man, they were big.
Oh my gosh. Don't get me fussing about the falling off conversation. I was arguing earlier today with someone because I was like, I hate how, unfortunately, the way we look at music is so different today.
Mm-hmm.
If you aren't doing something right now, or if you don't, also, I feel like along with that, when artists kind of come on, well, we're actually talking about Aaliyah, and this has kind of come up before in an earlier episode, how Aaliyah started out as a solid artist, got bigger. We lost her too soon. Unfortunately, today, if you don't start out at this top level, you watch it fell off. And if you don't maintain that top level, you watch it fell off. Like we don't give time artists to grow, and we don't go back and look back and say, man, they had a really good career. Things might be slow now, but they paved the way. So show love to the ground, those who paved the way, those who laid the groundwork, to the legends and architects of what we love. Just show them love before they die. Mm-hmm. Don't wait till BET does something after they die.
And shout out to En Vogue, their last album, they're still doing it, with the 3 members. Their last album was actually really good as well. So they're still doing it at a high level.
Yeah,
that was one of the last groups I saw on tour before everything shut down. And they were great. They were fantastic.
Mm-hmm. A couple more albums I want to mention here. We have El DeBarge. He dropped an album this year. Tom, I know you're a huge El DeBarge fan. Sade. Ed, I see this Sade album on my Twitter like every other day.
In my opinion, it's her best album, and she's one of those artists. We were talking on Facebook in the Soul and Stereo Cypher. Come join us if you haven't. And we were talking about artists who have had just like a run with no bad albums. Artists who have had all albums that are essentially 4 stars and above. And to me, she's one of them because I consider this her best. but none of her albums slip. None of them are weak. And this one is a signature one for her. Definitely one of the best of the year.
Pet peeve alert, guys. Sade is actually the name of a band. Sade happens to be the lead singer of that band.
That's
no, that's true. That's true.
That is true. My bad.
Just want to clear that up. They also need to come back with it.
It's also a woman, so it's yes. Cool.
Well, in 2021, every she is a they anyway. So.
Oh my gosh! Let's skip over that before we get canceled.
It's true. After Seven dropped the project in 1992. After Seven has been doing it for a while now, Tom.
Their last album was another one that was really good as well.
It was.
And that was after a long hiatus. So
yep.
I don't remember a lot about this album though, Ed. What did you think?
No, this one is one I haven't heard in forever, so I can't even kind of weigh in on this one. But again, have you heard a bad After Seven album? No.
That's true.
So I guarantee you that even then it was a quality. This is one I'm sure I listened to forever and a day ago, but it's After Seven. It ain't gonna be bad.
And then, guys, a couple of New Jack Swing artists that came out swinging in 1992. No pun intended. I'll Be Sure, High Five, and Ed's boy, Tom, you'll be happy about this one, Chucky Booker.
Chucky, I've been waiting for this one. I've been waiting for Chucky. Was this the Nice and Wild album? Because that album was good. That is a great album. I know we joke about Chucky, but make sure if you are up on Chucky and you're just like, let me see what this guy is that they're joking about. He's not a meme. He's actually pretty great. Take some time this week. Go check out that album. Check out Games. My man had a lot of talent, and he's one of those artists that I felt like just did not get the love he deserved. He's somebody that could have transitioned, in my opinion, well into the late part of the 90s for sure.
Yeah.
And High Five. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, I was going to say, no one really talks about Chucky Booker anymore as one of the guys from the early 90s.
No, and they should, because he wasn't somebody that like made this huge impact, but he was just so good for the time. Another one, Glenn Lewis. Oh my gosh, that's Tom's boy, Glenn Lewis. Glenn Jones. To me, another one of like the best vocalists of all time that just does not get the love that he deserves. Another one who had a great album this year. There's so many hidden gems in 92.
I got a shout out though, High Five. Rest in peace to Tony Thompson.
Yes.
And this album had She's Playing Hard to Get and Quality Time on it. And a little known fact I found out when reading about this album, it had the first appearance of Faith Evans on it. I didn't know that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
All the way back in 92.
That's good stuff. Let's get into some rookies here if we can.
All right.
I'm going to name them. I think I missed a couple. One that I definitely missed on the collage because I didn't have enough space was Immature. They were doing it in 1992, guys.
1992. Immature is so funny to me because, again, music is so relative. We were talking about this on the Cypher this week, too, about how, and we're talking about with the Ashanti thing, how, like, if you were coming up and, like, if you were, like, 10, 11, 12 in 2002, Ashanti seemed as big as freaking Whitney because she was just huge and you related to her. The girls in my class, I've talked about this before, you could sworn that Immature was the Jackson 5. They were all over these weird little boys with eye patches and weird hair. The ladies loved them. Immature was doing, and they would go on. They annoyed me at the time because, of course, they did. Because I'm a young dude. It's like, why are you girls screaming over this other young dude? But as they would go on, they would become pretty good with some great songs. And as you know, your boy Marcus Houston did his thing as well.
Yep. I'm just going to name off the ones that I do have on the collage. I believe Portrait should have been on this collage too. I'll let Derek Dunn talk about.
You left them out? Oh, no. You're going to feel that pain from someone we know.
I think that's why he ignored our message. But the ones I do have on the collage, I have Brian McKnight, who doesn't even look like Brian McKnight in the album cover.
He looks like a baby.
Yeah.
He's young.
Shantae Moore, Mary J. Blige, Shy, SWV, TLC, Jade, Ed's favorite group, Silk, and Public Announcement, and R. Kelly.
What a freaking year for rookies. Wow.
What a rookie year that is. Like, legit legends would come from this class in 92. Like, that's an incredible year.
I mean, Ed, before we get started, I know you do a whatever happened to segment on soulandstereo.com where you go back, you find these artists that were once big and maybe they're not on the mainstream anymore. Maybe they just have a day job. Where is Public Announcement in 2021?
I would like to answer that question, and maybe they need to be next on the list because I have not heard from those brothers in a minute. And if I were them, I would probably lay low too, considering who they're tied to. But at the time, they were another group. Now they weren't on the pinnacle because, as we've said, 92 was some stiff competition. But I mean, they had so much promise, and the singer who was backing them up as well was giving them a lot of juice in that end. He went solo and did his thing. Yep. But Public Announcement for sure was turning heads at this time.
So let's get started with these rookies here. I mean, we got to talk about Mary J. Blige. What's the 411? Iconic album, game-changing album. Tom, let's talk about this Mary album. What do you like about
Classic album, one of my favorites of all time. I still don't know if I'd call it her best. I mean, it's my personal favorite of hers probably, but
really?
I'd have to. No, I don't, because that's another one. I don't think it's a no skip. I think either My Life or what's the third one called again?
Share My World.
Yeah, Share My World.
Yeah,
I'd have to look, but it's close. But iconic album and really a game changer. And I think this album has influenced so many people after it. You know, it came right in the tail end of New Jack Swing, fit in perfectly. She was able to, you know, take that success and, you know, transition her sound even further from here. But man, I love to put this album on. It's just feel good, up tempo jams, you know, the slow jams as well. It's a banger right there, Ed.
Well, there are songs that we've talked about before where you just know it's a hit, and it's like you remember where you were the first time you heard it. I remember when Real Love came out, my friend was over at my house after school, and he was like, you got to hear this new song. It's called Real Love, Mary J. Blige. You got to hear it. It's like the craziest song. So this was like 7th grade or something. And it was so funny because like an hour later, we had MTV on in the background and we saw the video for the first time. And again, like looking back at it now, you might not think it's anything big and special, but the sound was so different and the energy was so different. And I'll never forget watching them dancing in the street with the Timbs. And I'm like captivated. And to me, this isn't even the best song on the album, but there was something about the sound that was so different than what we were hearing at the time with New Jack Swing. And as I've said before, New Jack Swing had really worn out his welcome with me by now. Everything sounded the same. I was bored with it. That's why I wasn't a huge music fan at this time. I just kind of liked it casually. But that Real Love will always stick with me at being a turning point in my fandom because I was like, man, this is so different and so cool. And she followed up with that with this album. I agree with Tom. I don't think it's her best album. I still think it's very close to 5 stars. I wouldn't give it 5 stars, 4.5. Very, very good album. But when it definitely stands the test of time.
So I've been challenged to name which songs I skip. If I can just mention those real quick. I'm looking at my iTunes ratings here. Slow Down, Changes I've Been Going Through, and What's the 411 are not my favorite songs on the album.
I like Changes I've Been Going Through. I agree with the other two.
Yeah, so there you go.
But You Remind Me? Now that's a great song.
Yes, 5 stars. 5-star song right there.
That is a 5-star song. Let's talk about SWV's debut, because this is one, and this lets you know how great this debut album was. We had posted the collage. We asked the people, what album are they still listening to and loving today? Jimmy Jam from the legendary group Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis said SWV's debut. You have Weak on here. You have Right Here. Can't forget about the Human Nature remix, which a young Pharrell Williams was ad-libbing on that. And just so many big records on here. This was a big moment for R&B, Ed.
Man, going back and looking at this track list, and the thing that hits me the most is how many singles came from this one album. Yep. How many singles do we get? Do we even get a single today? I know it's a totally different landscape, but like they got so much juice out of this album. Like I remember, y'all are too young. Most of you on this stream are too young to know this. Downtown was the most scandalous song in the history of scandals at the time because I mean, it was innuendo. It was subtle. It was subtle enough that it wasn't overt, but you knew what they were talking about. And it was like, this song is so nasty. So they were able to kind of step out and do some things, push some boundaries a little bit, but they also had, again, that Mary J. Blige energy where it was a different vibe from New Jack Swing. It was a little like New Jack Swing, but a nice right turn into a sound that was a little bit more soulful. Shout out to Brian Alexander Morgan for doing this thing all up and down that album. Yeah, so many great songs. And I kind of agree with Jimmy Jam. This joint I go back to a lot. Their best album, in my opinion.
And when you talk about the song Weak, I mean, tell me a song in the 90s that had more emotion in it or will make you feel something than that one. What a song right there.
Well, yeah, let me tell you a song in the 90s that you heard more at a talent show than that one. Every girl who could halfway sing was singing that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would not an easy one to pull off, though.
But everyone will try.
Yes.
I would say it's that record when we talk about R&B and the D'Angelo record. How Does It Feel? Everyone covers those two songs. Everyone.
But your vocals better be on point, or it'll be a rough 3 or 4 minutes.
They're usually not, but people do try. Guys, let's talk about TLC's debut album here. Ain't Too Proud to Beg, Baby, Baby, Baby. Some big records. They were young at the time, but this was just the start to a legendary career.
Absolutely. And once again, this is another one. Well, this one's a little bit more New Jack Swing than the last two that we mentioned, but they brought something new to the table because, and something my wife told me always stuck with me. They were the first group that she heard from her generation that was really speaking on issues that really affected her. And she felt like they were really speaking for her. So they were able to, TLC has always been big in women's empowerment. And it started with this album by connecting with young girls of the early 90s. And a lot of these songs, again, they were running around with condoms strapped on themselves. I'm telling you, I was so young, I didn't know what a condom was. I thought it was like an egg yolk in her glasses. Because I was like, what is that? I just thought it was some prop. But these were things that they were able to talk about, sexuality and things that were kind of taboo in the early 90s. I know y'all are doing whatever with your WAP now, but at the time, this was big things. That was a big transition. And while they were going to have at least a couple albums better than their debut, it was still a very, very strong entry point for them.
It's interesting because I rarely ever hear songs from this album replayed at any point. And I'm looking at the singles, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, Baby, 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 What About Your Friends, and Hat to the Back, which to me are all really good songs.
Yeah,
I never hear them. Another interesting thing I want to point out about this album, it was released on LaFace, and L.A. Reid and Babyface, I believe, were only on one song. I found that kind of interesting, but a young Dallas Austin handled the majority of the production. So I found that interesting that L.A. Reid and Babyface weren't more hands-on with all their own projects here.
Hey, gotta go.
I don't know why.
You gotta go with what works.
Yeah.
And it worked. Ed, it's finally time to talk about your favorite group of all time.
Oh, we're gonna do it?
So you gotta put it in perspective for us. Your favorite artist of all time is who?
King Keith Sweat, no doubt.
So when this group came out, Silk, and Keith was all over this album, and you could hear Keith's penmanship, you can hear his sound. But you hear singers that are probably better than Keith.
Wait a minute.
Come on. Little G?
I'm not going to debate that. Keep going before I throw my bottle.
Dude, Little G is like one of the greatest vocalists
of all time. I would put it up there.
Yeah, I would too. So when you hear these singers singing Keith records, but taking it up to another level because of their vocal capabilities, how are you processing this in 1992?
Let me tell you why. And this is going to blow your mind, because at the time in 92, and especially this album, like going into 93, 94, because remember, I'm more of a casual fan. I didn't like this album because Keith was on it. I liked it because I loved the sound. I loved the way it was written. I loved the way it was produced. So after the fact, I found out my boy Keith was the one that did it. That proves that I don't have a Keith bias, because I didn't know Keith penned or wrote or produced these songs, but I love his sound so much that my ears were like, this is dope. And then I realized that dopeness was coming from one dope dude, when at the time I didn't know that. So I was a fan of Keith before I even knew Keith did this record. And he, as you said, he's up and down this whole thing. I think he did everything but like 1 or 2 songs. So this is definitely a key project, all the way down to the interlude at the beginning. So I love it because it has the Keith sound, but these brothers be singing. They be singing on this thing.
Shout out to our boy John John. Now, Ed, there is a trivia time. You ready for this trivia question?
Okay.
Track number 2, Happy Days, featuring Keith Sweat. Who rapped on the song?
Oh my gosh. I know this because I'm a Batman stan. Some weirdo named the Riddler.
No.
Now, do we need to bring up the picture of Ed as the Riddler?
Oh my gosh, again.
You were rapping on the song, Ed?
I wish I didn't have my Riddler cane then, but I can replay the rap.
Actually, let's do another R&B trivia here. Name all the members of Silk. This should be
Oh,
easy
no.
for you.
No, I
Ed.
can't do that, player.
What?
Look, no, I can't do that.
You have Little G.
Well, I got Lil G.
Isn't there
I
a
got
Big G?
John John.
There's a Big G too, right?
Yes, there's a Big G.
Timzo.
Timzo is who I always forget. So we got Lil G, Big G,
John John.
John John, Timzo. There's another guy like Jimmy or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jimmy, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've met
I
him
always
before.
forget Timzo. That's who I forget all the time. Shout out Timzo. No offense, brother. Love all y'all. I
Yeah.
just forget you.
Shout outs to Timzo. Good guy too. I've met him. Really good guy. I've met the whole group. They're all really nice. Let's talk about a couple of other albums here. I really wanted to give a shout out to Ashanti Moore because a lot of people were raving about this album, and just as an artist, Tom, super underrated. But her vocals, like she can go toe to toe with anybody.
Super talented vocalist, great artist. She's another one who's still releasing quality music even to this day. Geez, we're almost 30 years later. And she deserves a lot of credit. Ed, did you like this one?
This is another one that I didn't listen to at the time. I listened to it kind of later, and I remember I listened to it because I had a friend in, man, it was like 6th or 7th grade. Oh, 7th grade. I met him in 7th grade. Yeah, this is 7th grade for me, so it's coming back to me. Like, this dude was obsessed with Shantae. He thought she was the finest thing ever, and to this day, he still talks about that. So I listened to this album because of his standing and crushing. But yeah, it's a great album, and Shantae is another one of those artists that I feel like throughout the 90s, a lot of these years that we've talked about, we've kind of mentioned, oh, and Shantae had an album. We kind of move on to the next. 9 times out of 10, that album that we just kind of gloss over is pretty good. So she's another one. I think if you're interested, go check out all of her stuff. She's very solid. I like kind of her late 90s stuff. Those kind of sit with me more. But this early stuff, man, some hits on it.
And Tom, Jade, you had a chance to interview the group a couple years back, and like this album, people love this album, but they couldn't quite make it through that transitional period after New Jack Swing had died. But at the time, Jade had a lot of fans.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know why what happened. I don't really know the story of what happened to them. I didn't really catch on, but at the time they were, right there, one of the bigger groups.
Yeah.
I don't want to speak definitively on it. I almost kind of hate to say it because, we're seen as experts and I don't want to be starting rumors. But at the time, it was just like there were just rumors of infighting and they just couldn't get along. And the stereotypes of, oh, girl groups can't stay together and it's going to be something. So there's always that drama that circulates around it. I don't know if that's really true because I don't remember the backstory. But at the time, it was kind of like they fell off because they broke apart with infighting. But at the time, they were really another one of those groups. In hindsight, it's kind of like, oh, it wasn't a big deal. But in 92, if we were talking about rookies, they would be very high on the list. They were very, very big. The Ashanti of 92, Kyle.
Wow.
Oh,
Relax.
Kyle, can I tell you a group who has always remained together through the years?
Silk?
Nope.
No.
The group,
no, not
members, the group members of the SoulBack podcast.
That is true.
That's true.
That is true.
It's us and
All
Jagged
these
Edge.
years.
It's us and Jagged Edge.
We have none of us have gone to jail yet. We're good.
Oh boy.
Calm down. Brian McKnight dropped an album. A lot of people don't even know that this is his debut album. Brian McKnight has been out for a long time. I think he's on like 22 albums now. So go check every single one of them. And lastly, Ed, we have to talk about the man we're not allowed to talk about.
Oh boy.
But what's interesting, guys, with this album, I was reading an interview from like way back, and R. Kelly said that pretty much he had to put R. Kelly and Public Announcement as a collective thing because groups were big at the time, and that's what the labels wanted. They wanted a group. They didn't want just a solo artist. So that's why this album, even though we talked about this last week, even though technically I would say that 12 Play is his debut album, this is the album that we first heard R. Kelly. So talk about this album, Ed.
It's just funny to me, going back to your point about the group thing. Again, it sounds weird to hear that now because I don't think we could name 4 groups right now in 2021. Year our Lord.
Wait. No, I've got Migos.
No, I'm talking about groups of quality and standard.
Oh, okay.
Not weirdos from Disney cartoons. Anyway, my point is, in the 90s, yes, that was like you had to come in as a group. And it sounds weird today because the dynamic is so different. It's just like, what's your Instagram looking like? We'll figure out the singing later. Like, what's your IG popping? Then we'll do that. But at the time, you had to have that group dynamic because that was what's selling. He broke out, and as we saw, good for his career later on down the line. But this album, as I said a little bit earlier, I thought it was promising. I heard it. I don't think I heard it at the time. I think I heard it much later, maybe even after 12 Play when I heard it. And I thought that it showed a lot of promise, but a lot of what we would know about R. Kelly going down the line kind of started more so with 12 Play, whereas here he was getting his feet wet. But he kind of really branched out. But if you want to hear this album just for history's sake, check it out and you can see where the start of what he would become. Minus the
thing about public announcement. My experience of them is driving to high school in 2000 and hearing their song on Hot 97 being played, Mamacita. Do you remember that? It was played like every morning.
Yep, I remember that.
Crazy.
And then lastly, I got to talk about Shy. If I Ever Fall in Love. Isn't this like an a cappella song?
Yes, man. Listen.
And it was a hit.
This was another song. I'm telling y'all, this is another song we talked about week. This is the male version of week. Brothers would get together. Again, what did we just say about groups? You had to have a group. Get your boys together. If y'all could sing, post up on that talent show. And let me see if we could do Shy. Because Shy, and that's another one, the ladies in 1992, they loved them some Shy. That voice had them weak.
That's an amazing
no
thing.
Pun intended, by the way.
And
shout out to Dark Child in the house.
Shout out Dark Child.
Shout outs to Rodney Jerkins. But that's crazy if you think about that Shy record. You can't have an a cappella song on the radio anymore.
Who do you want singing? See, now y'all gonna get me in trouble. But who you want singing a cappella on our radio today?
I mean, there's people that can do it, but
I actually think they can do it. We just don't get a chance to hear them in their full abilities.
I think some can. I think one or two, maybe two. But overall, take away that trap and you're sounding kind of rough.
Well, I'll tell you who can, just because Dark Child's here. I got to mention him, Jack Ross. That's his artist. And go check out Jack Ross. That guy is a monster on the vocals. You guys go check him out.
Look, I love me some vocals. Yes.
All right. So we'll bring in Derek Dunn now. He's been waiting. And it's a good time for Rodney to be joining us too, because he actually commented and said in 1992 he was listening to that Bobby Brown album. So, Derek, are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
All right, Derek. Well, I appreciate you for joining us. Just let the people know how old you are, because we've had a couple of 15-year-olds on this podcast.
Oh my God, he's 16 now.
I turned the big 40 in May.
Wow.
All right, Ed. We did it, man. We're not the oldest ones anymore.
Actually, I'm still the oldest by a few months.
I forgot.
I will never be beaten. I'm sorry. But I've got my peer in the house. That's the main thing.
There you go.
So, man, Derek, you got to talk to us about this Bobby Brown album from your perspective. I purposely saved these last 5 minutes, maybe 20, for you to talk about it. Where were you in your life when this Bobby Brown album came out? And is it a classic?
When the Bobby album dropped, that was summer of 92. I had just moved to Huntsville, Alabama. My mom was in the military and she was going to Korea. So I decided to stay with my grandparents down south. And the thing about the Bobby album is, to caveat to what Ed was saying, it was kind of the end of his monster run. And I think what did Bobby in, unfortunately, was marrying Whitney and the delay that he did between albums, because even though he did 7 million off of Don't Be Cruel, he waited 4 years to drop, the next album, and you just couldn't do that unless you're Michael Jackson. You can't take a 4-year break. So the Bobby album, it's a good album. It's not a classic, but it's not a trash album. It's actually a very strong album. I revisited it about a month ago with my guy Terrence, went through track by track, and it's a very strong album. I mean, he had Teddy on there producing, he had Babyface, the guys from Rex and Effect. The tour was crazy. He had Shabba Ranks, TLC, and Mary opening up for him. That's the album with Something in Common with Whitney, but it was just, I think the timing was off. Maybe 91 might have been a better look as opposed to 92, because again, it was a 4-year break, and everything you guys have been saying, the competition was just so strong in 92. Not to mention Dangerous was, out that same year, so he really couldn't be seen as the king of New Jack Swing anymore. As Ed said, Mike came in and took it to another level.
Nope. So Derek, before we go on to our Rookie of the Year and decide who's that, I want to ask you, man, 1992, this is a year that you really wanted to be a part of, for this podcast, specifically 1992. Why that year? What makes 1992 such a standout year for you?
I mean, 92 for me is when groups were really just on fire. And you guys mentioned so many groups that were coming out. And the thing is, in the 90s, everybody was bringing their A game. It wasn't where you would have like one hot song or two hot songs. Like the bulk of the album will be fire. I mean, you guys mentioned Portrait. You mentioned Shy. You mentioned Silk. You had After 7. You had Troops Deepa album, which is actually a very strong album that doesn't get a lot of credit. I mean, Steve Russell was like 19, 20, probably early 20s at the time. And Steve was doing stuff like somebody twice his age bracket was doing with the production. So 92 was just, you're coming into puberty, at least I was, and all these love songs starting to make sense, when you're going to the dances and you really feel what they're talking about. And it was a time when, your parents could listen to music you're listening to, and it was all love. It wasn't, vulgarity wasn't there yet. It was still, a good time to be alive.
Amazing. So Tom and Ed, are you guys ready for the Rookie of the Year?
Oh, I stay ready.
One question. One more question for Derek. The Bobby Brown album cover, was that considered vulgarity?
No, not at all. I mean, I think that was just him being Bob. I mean, the stuff that he was doing, it was just Bob being Bob. I mean, Shabba Ranks is probably a bit more vulgar than Bob was with his stuff.
What was that? It was like half a shirt, though. I never really got it, I guess.
If I recall correctly in the movie, I think it was like just the sleeves and his chest just out. This is before he got the gut. No shade, Bob.
It was just his back.
Yeah, it's just his back.
So he had a shirt with no back and just, I didn't know.
It's a shirt with just the sleeves and the
trendsetter.
Gotcha.
Yes.
It really caught on.
Yep. No, I didn't. Let's get into the Rookies of the Year here, guys. I have the collage ready. I want you guys to let me know. You know how this goes, Tom. I'll let you go first. I'm going to name the rookies. You let me know who you think had the best album or just you felt like had the biggest impact. So, Tom, Brian McKnight, Ashanti Moore, Mary J. Blige, Silk, Shy, SWV, TLC, Jade, The Men We're Not Allowed to Speak of, and Public Announcement, Immature. So of that group of artists, who was your Rookie of the Year?
Well, I'm going to go back to the rules we loosely follow, Ed, on every episode of if we pick them as a rookie. If we pick them as a rookie, I'm not going to include them in my top 3. So I'm not going to say Mary J intentionally. I'm going to go with Silk, actually, because they're deserving. And I think actually my top 3 are all rookies, but Silk is probably my 4th best. So there you go, Silk.
Ed, what about you?
First of all, I don't abide by Tom's rules, but I will say that looking past that, my rookie, because I have to judge by what was going on in 92, my 92 brain, If it was 92, like I said, I remember that debut. I remember that video. I remember that moment on MTV that stuck with me all these years. Got to say Mary J. She was a game changer at the time, and you knew it. She was one of those artists that some artists, they start small, like an Usher, kind of start and build to a big career. Mm-hmm. Mary came out the gate. You knew it was changing. You know the game was changing. Got to go with Mary for the Rookie of the Year.
What about you, Derek?
92. I think as a complete album, I'm probably gonna get some side eyes, but for a debut, I'm gonna go with Portrait because that album was entirely produced by them. Everybody sang lead, so I give credit to when you're doing it yourself. But as far as for the culture, it's got to be Mary. But my personal one is gonna be Portrait.
Were you paid to pick that by one of our friends?
No. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
because friend is going to send you a DM very soon.
Oh man.
I can't.
Portrait. Derek, we were told by our friend Soul Child that Portrait's second album is one of the best albums of all time. Is this true?
Of all time.
For 95, yeah, and that second Portrait album, again, start to finish with the production, 4 lead singers doing everything themselves. Yeah, Portrait doesn't get enough credit, especially Michael Angelo Salisbury. So Tom, I hold Portrait in high regard. I'm
gonna go back and listen to that second Portrait album. If you guys are telling me it's the best of all time,
it's good, but I don't know about that. But I will co-sign it's very good.
Okay. Ed, hold on. Ed, is Portrait a one-hit wonder?
Oh,
I mean, don't say it like that.
No, but ask a random person, name a Portrait song. They're probably only gonna know one song.
I mean, when we talk about, and I talked about this before, when we talked about like what determines what a one-hit wonder is, a lot of times we just kind of get mixed up. They had one big like pop hit.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of like seems like they should. I hate to say it. Well, Honey Dip did okay.
I wouldn't say they're. Let me interject.
They're close, dog. They're close.
I wouldn't say they're one hit because you guys know that I'm an Air Force vet. So when I was overseas and I played an album track and I got the dance floor packed, that's how I know they're not a one hit wonder. And their biggest song is actually their cover of How Deep Is Your Love from '95. So that's actually bigger than. That was a big pop record for them. So,
but that was also big overseas. Like that was, we're talking US, their biggest was like, the Here We Go Again. But they did have other songs. But when we talk about like, pop, if we're judging it by pop, then they might be one hit one. And that's no beef. I love Portrait. I'm not diminishing them out by all. But if we're looking like one big hit, they might be under my rules that I made when I did that one hit wonder list a few months ago. Maybe so. I never thought of it like that. So I might be right.
Listen, Derek, if you go overseas, they'll tell you Horace Brown's Superstar.
It's different. God. No, it's different over there. It's different. You can't.
It is.
I mean, North America is fickle.
Listen, we're just joking. We show all these artists love. Yeah. We show all these artists love, but they tend to. Never mind. Keep it moving.
No, all right. Tom, I'm trying to get you out of trouble, Tom. Tom's DM is gonna be on fire after this show.
Listen,
if you know what I'm talking about.
It's not hate. It's the fact that I was told that Horace Brown is a legend. I mean, he's made great music. He's not a legend. It's not hate.
Can I told me Ashanti had a classic album, and I'm over here sipping my tea.
That's fact. Actually,
can I just give you my Rookie of the Year?
Yes, please, because we all off track, though.
I would say Mary J. Blige is the Rookie of the Year, but I would say, see, here's the thing, SWV with those big singles and Weak, like out of all the songs and artists that we're talking about on this podcast, Weak might be that record that stands out above any of these other songs. For that alone, I really want to give him the Rookie of the Year, but I can't. Mary was a game-changing album, so I'm sorry, ladies. Got to go with Mary on this one.
Competition was tough in '92. I'm just telling you, it was tough.
Now let's get into our favorite 3 albums from 1992. How this works, Derek, is we each give out our number 3. We rotate number 2, keep going number 1. So Tom, what is your number 3 of this year?
I'm gonna have to go with TLC's album. I really think it's underrated, underappreciated. and very strong debut. They've gone on to become legends. And I got to go back and revisit this one again because it deserves a few spins. So I'm going with that one.
Ed?
Player. This is another very, very hard list to put together. I want to cheat and do 2 number 3s because I hate to leave one off. If I must, I might have to go with SWV for my number 3. But I really want to slide my boy Silk in there. I really want to slide my boys in there. So one of the two, choose one. Say SWV or Silk. Either one.
Ed, if you would have just simply followed the rules like I did, you could have had Silk at least mentioned in the Rookie of the Year.
They could have had something on their shelves.
They could have, but I don't cheat like Tom does.
They could have had some hardware.
Calm down. Someone else will get love later on. You shall see.
All right. Derek, number 3.
Number 3, I'm going to say Portrait's debut.
So they got 2 pieces of hardware. Impressive. Wow, I got to revisit that one. In all seriousness, I'm going to revisit that one.
No, you
and
should.
Their second album.
Both are very good, especially the second one.
Tom, I just mentioned a comment that I saw from our boy Shaquille Perry.
Oh boy,
Portrait is getting way too much airtime. Let's go back to the greats.
Oh, come on!
I'm sure that Shaquille is just mad that Aaliyah has not debuted yet, so we can't talk about her anymore. Calm down, brother. We'll talk about her on another show.
All right. Well, my number 3, I was gonna give it to En Vogue, but because I see this album on my Twitter every day, I'm gonna give it to the Sade album, the group Sade or the band Sade. It's tested, it's lasted, and its legacy is still strong. It's a strong album, so Sade will be my number 3. Tom, your number 2?
I gotta go with SWV. Amazing debut. Shout out to our boy Brian Alexander Morgan. When I interviewed him last year to talk about this album, he was so proud of the work he did on there, and it was great hearing the stories behind it. So I love that one. I still play that one, so I'm going with that as my number 2.
Ed?
Number 2, I gotta go with my girl / group, so I don't get yelled at by the group police over here. Sade, number 2. I said earlier, I think this is her best album, and she has a pretty flawless discography. I put this one at the top. So number 2's from Sade.
Derek, what's your number 2? And you can't pick Portrait again.
Number 2, just because it has one of my favorite songs from my favorite indie member. That's the More Money soundtrack, which we didn't talk about on the podcast. And that's that Jam and Lewis was on fire. The More Money soundtrack.
Off the wall pick it. Hold on, I gotta look this up right now.
Tom was not ready for that.
No, that's a good one. We didn't talk about that.
Trivia time. Derek Dunn, name every song in order on the album.
Oh, calm down.
You might be able to do it.
The first one is the More Money All Stars. The second one should be Luther and Janet, if I'm not mistaken. You had MC Light on there, Johnny Gill, Ralph Tresvant, Big Daddy Kane, Low Key, Mint Condition, Color Me Bad. Dialogue from the movie, I think it's 25 songs with little pieces of dialogue from the movie.
Yep.
Wow, I got to revisit this one as well. Shout out to Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis.
Yep.
Very New Jack Swingish joint. I remember that well.
So I guess it's my turn now for number 2.
Yep.
I'm gonna go with the Mary J. Blige album. It's not my favorite Mary album. I gave her Rookie of the Year because of the cultural impact. But even though this album has a lot of great songs on it, and it's a classic, undoubtedly, it's not my favorite album. Is it a 5-star album, Ed? I think based on impact, it has to be.
Impact.
But when I listen to this album from top to bottom, I don't think it's perfect. I think My Life is a lot stronger, but I mean, number 2 is, you still get the silver medal. So number 2 will be Mary J. Blige.
No question. I don't think it's 5 stars. Also, I don't grade by impact. I feel like that should be scored separately. I also don't give 5 stars for perfection because I can find something wrong with anything. But I do agree it's very good, but I give it 4.5.
Wait. No, there is a perfect album. What's wrong with Off the Wall?
Give me some time. I'll find something wrong with it. I did give that 5 stars, so
Yeah.
argument made.
Yeah, Off the Wall is a 5-star album.
Oh, no question. No
Thriller,
question.
Thriller, I might have an issue with, but I think Off the Wall is 5 stars.
I gave both 5 stars.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm seeing a comment. Mary's debut is better than Breakthrough. Who doubted that fact? I must have missed a comment somewhere.
You can't compare the two. That's like a 13-year difference.
No, you can't compare the two.
Yeah.
Yes, it's better than Breakthrough.
Yeah. Now, before we get to our number one, as promised, it's the chicken intermission.
Oh boy!
Oh my!
You thought I forgot about the chicken intermission?
I did think you forgot about that.
So I have to tell you guys a story before we get back to this number one pick. I was
the fans are pissed in their comments here, just so you know. Go ahead.
What they say?
No, I'm just kidding, but they will. Well, keep going.
Anyways, I was at KFC today, and I tried their plant-based sandwich. Tom has influenced me to try plant-based food.
There we go.
Ed,
smart guy.
Ed, Derek, that sandwich was not good.
Oh, it was not good. I thought you were going to say it was great.
It was not good at all. It was dry. Literally, I think the sauce is what saved that sandwich because it was not good.
Did it taste like chicken?
No.
That's the key, though. When you're eating for health, it's not going to taste good. You just got to drown it in sauce and not worry about the taste.
But, player, that offsets the health.
That's true.
However, I will say the one positive thing that came out of this is normally when I have a chicken sandwich from like Popeyes or Church's, I feel like crap. This one actually made me feel okay. I didn't feel like dying after. So
there you go.
So that's your chicken intermission for today.
Well, Derek says he eats both boneless and bone-in from the last podcast. So, player, get all the chicken you want.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Derek, do you eat chicken?
Of course. All the time.
What's your
what
favorite
kind of
chicken?
Question is that, Tom?
I don't know if he's a vegetarian or, some weirdo like me when it comes to food.
Do you like your chicken skinless or skinned?
Skinned. Boneless wings all the way.
Boneless wings?
Yeah, boneless.
Aren't those just chicken nuggets?
Wait, that's...
Well,
technically, if you want to get technical, yes.
Okay. All right. Can we proceed with our number one?
We might as well.
Overrated. Damon Dunn says chicken is overrated. I don't even know where to go with that.
I don't know where to go. We've had that argument before.
That's not one of those things that you can underrate or overrate.
I don't think so either.
It's an essential commodity.
Listen,
like you either have it or you don't.
Damon Dunn is still drinking from his baby bottle. Leave that guy alone.
All right.
Number one, 16. There's probably something in that bottle by now. I need to check it.
All right. Number one album of 1992, Tom.
Guys, you already know mine. But in the last 15 minutes, I've reconsidered. My number one is now Portrait's self-titled debut album, guys. They did it. They got more hardware.
Wow.
Look at this bandwagoner.
I did it for overseas, guys. We got to represent.
What?
I'm just kidding. I got to go with Mary J.
Mm-hmm.
What's a 411? No question. Classic. A couple skippable tracks, but impact-wise, you got to love it.
Ed?
Now, the last time we came to this part where I named number one, and I named the soundtrack, and everybody went nuts. If I was left to my own devices, I might say that the Boomerang soundtrack is number one. But to keep everybody from going nuts, I agree. Let's go with Mary. Let's go with What's the 411. As we said, I don't think it's her best, but for this moment in time, it's probably the most influential in this moment in time to kind of move R&B in another direction.
What about you, Derek?
Now, with the age of 39, just from a production standpoint, my personal would be probably Troops Deeper, just because where I was at mentally when I really heard this album. But no, it's the choice would have to be Mary, just for everything that she did, everything she changed. And I'm gonna say it, if I get hate, oh well, but Biggie's verse on that remix to Real Love shits on a lot of people's entire catalogs that preceded it.
Talk about it.
You know,
hey, this is a PG podcast.
Exactly. Cut his mic.
No, keep it on. I love facts.
Definitely Mary's album, though. You can't downplay the legacy and the impact of that album.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of which, Tom, I saw somebody wanted a Tupac versus Biggie versus.
Yeah, that's going to be very live. I mean, how they just going to play songs? I don't.
That's going to be very live. I will
Pun
give
intended
you a tonight for that.
Pun intended.
Yeah.
Oh God. And another person who has passed on. Pun intended.
Are there children? Well, no, Pac didn't even have kids, so I can't say their kids will be playing the song. I don't.
Yeah.
It would be cool, but I don't know who would be able to pick the song. You know, it's not
right.
That's true. My number one will have to be SWV. I think this is one of those albums from top to bottom that you can just play. Similar to the Mary album, but I just feel like that SWV album, like production-wise, Coco sounds amazing on that album. And Brian Alexander Morgan, one of the most underrated producers of the 90s. The work that he did with SWV on that Usher album, on debut Usher album. And a lot of these producers, I'm not sure if Rodney's still in here, but a lot of these producers that have come up later, they look up to Brian Alexander Morgan. So I got to give him some love, and SWV is my number one for 1992. And that, my friend and friends, concludes our yearly recap on R&B. We've had long discussions about it. We will not be doing a 1991 and 1990 unless, I guess, we get paid to. Don't pay us to do it.
We did a New Jack Swing edition. Some people forget. Go back and revisit. We're on all streaming formats. We did a whole New Jack Swing edition. So we covered a lot of that.
Right. And that's why it's kind of there's no need to retread that ground. And as we talked about before, in the future, we will do a 1980s decade episode.
Ooh,
not the individual years, but we will do an episode on the 1980s to come at some point in the future. Not necessarily next week, but hang tight. We'll have that soon.
Yep. And Music Scribe, we're going to get you on this podcast sooner than later. So guys, I think that's it for this week. Ed, what's going on with soulandstereo.com?
Man, soulandstereo.com. There were so many albums that we talked about this podcast that you can go check out. Go check out my album rankings, and you can see my thoughts on Sade, Mary J, Silk, SWV, TLC. I've ranked all those discographies, and pretty much all the albums we talked about this week, pretty high on the list. But as far as new content, check out my head-to-head with our girl Nicolette. I don't think Nicolette was in the house tonight, but she sometimes is. But we went back and forth on her favorite, my girl Tamia, the best. I was gonna say the best and worst, but Tamia doesn't really have any worst. But her best albums, her best songs, her best singles. And we asked the question, why is she still so underrated all these years later? So check out that head-to-head on Soul and Stereo. And I've got some new tricks coming in the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye on the site.
All right. Tom, I got Soul.
We've been putting out a bunch of top 10 lists. We revisit artist discographies, try to pick out their best songs and whatever we felt like was overlooked or underrated. So kind of hand in hand with what Ed is doing, revisit artists. We kind of look at their discography, pick their best songs. And Ed, we actually were inspired and did a Tamia one. So
that's what's up. I missed it.
I got to read your article and see which songs you guys picked. But she's one of the best. And Kyle, you did an interview recently.
Yeah, I did one with Jay Holiday last week, I think it was. Time just flies now. But yeah, I did one with him. Ride is his new single. Go check out Ride. And soon, I think we're going to be talking with Robin Thicke, speaking that into existence. But I think that's happening. He has a new album dropping in mid-February. He just dropped a new record with Pharrell. Go check that one out. And I think that is it for this week's episode. 1992 is done.
Hold on.
Speaking of Derek done,
plug.
Yeah, well,
let Derek.
I had a segue to this.
Oh man,
get your segue on, Kyle.
Yeah, and now I've lost it. It was something.
Start it over.
Well, I've lost it now. Reviews and done. What's going on with reviews and done, Derek?
Same old. More flashback album reviews on the podcast and throwback album reviews. This coming week, I reviewed Sean Levert's 95 album that people probably don't know about. More movie reviews, reviewing Denzel's movie this week, and some more. It's going to be another busy week. Probably 10 articles this week, I think. I don't know. I don't lost count.
Derek,
Nice.
I've got to get back on the show. Derek and I did one of the first episodes of his podcast, but fate wouldn't let us be great, dog, and the episode never came out. So we need to redo that Keith episode sooner than later.
So did he get Tom on also to do an album?
We'll make it happen, man.
Hey, you guys can
Soul Child, I'm
you guys
sure.
can do that portrait album. Tom, that would be your
Yes,
time.
yes.
Oh boy, I can't wait.
All right. Well, I think that's it for this week. 1992 is done. That was what I was going to say. 1992 is done. Speaking of Derek Dunn, that was the segue, Tom. But you stole
There
my
we go.
thunder.
Good
So,
stuff.
You could've kept that.
so we're finished for this week. We'll be back next week, hopefully, with something else. But until then, everyone stay safe. Wear your masks. Wash your hands. Don't hoard toilet paper and listen to good R&B and not bad R&B. So,
Yeah.
guys, we'll be back next week. So you guys be safe and take care.
All right, y'all.
All right.